Well, my name is Sven Lorenz and I'm a professional private investor. That's probably the expression that describes me best. I've been doing this for 18 years. I've never done anything else but investing. That's been my entire life. It's a profession that I ended up in by coincidence, by chance. I ended up having a freelance job for an investment newsletter while I was still in high school. That snowballed into activities that very much were about investing my own money. What little funds I had at the time, it wasn't that much. I started with £10,000, which I always like to mention simply because I think investors and private individuals should really take their own financial affairs into their own hands, or at least try to, and spend some time on it, make some effort, because it's not rocket science and it's a field that you can enter quite easily yourself, especially nowadays with the kind of research resources that you've got on the web, which in my days didn't exist, which was an advantage and a disadvantage, but that's a different story. In any case, nowadays I hold two stakes in two investment companies, one in Switzerland, one in Germany. That's where I develop some entrepreneurial, more business-orientated investment activities. And I also quite simply invest my own money into the stock market, into opportunities that I think make some money for myself.
Now you're pretty much a long-term trader or investor, aren't you? You don't tend to look at the short term too much.
Generally I hope that my investments turn out somewhere in the middle. I'm not a day trader. I just wasn't born with that hang of knowing where stocks are going to go in the next 2 or 3 days. At the same time, I don't want to hold things for 3, 4 or 5 days under normal 3, 4 or 5 years under normal circumstances. That's just a bit too long. In an ideal world, I'd love to invest into shares exclusively where I know that within 6 or 12 months something is going to happen. And from an analytical point of view, I think that's also the time span for which you can, with reasonable accuracy, make a prediction of what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen 3 years down the road, but within the next 6 to 12 months, yeah, you can kind of make an informed guess about things and place your bets accordingly.
Okay, so that's your strategy on investing. So what about the site? Because you have the site undervaluedshares.com.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
That site is really about two things. First of all, the kind of investment that I'm looking at is very much about deep value plays. That's how we call them. It's about buying assets on the cheap. It's not about investing into biotechnology companies that come up with a patent for some amazing invention. That's something that I simply don't understand. It's about buying something that is offered to me too cheap for whatever reason. And I started writing reports that are published on the web in 1998, so I've been doing this for quite a long time. And this writing has always been a tool for myself to structure my own thoughts and to test them by passing them on to other investors and say, read this and let me know what you think. And one of the really valuable things that I get out of this site is feedback from people who might have a different opinion about things, where I then get to look at the entire affair from an angle that otherwise I wouldn't have come across, and where I can test my own theories. I find that tremendously useful, and it's just the whole networking aspect, because you need to generate new ideas. Reading mainstream magazines about investing generally really is about reading the PR that companies want to see appear in magazines. These articles are mostly paid for one way or another, even if it's not paid for in the conventional sense. It's advertising money and PR agencies and so on and so forth. And being in touch with like-minded individuals just enables me to come across other ideas, because they tell me about their ideas, I tell them about my ideas, and it works really well for both sides.
And of course, you've got a journalistic background, haven't you, over the years of writing for financial publications and such
yes,
like?
I did all that, and I've been offered so much money to write about certain shares, and I've been to meetings where companies were speaking to their PR advisors about their strategy, what they need to get out there. All this information is useful to a certain extent, but what you really want to do is take an independent view at things. And by and large, for example, I totally avoid meeting up with the management of companies, because you only ever get the one-sided view from the management. I just really like to stay in my office, read about things, and form an opinion independently, just based on the pure facts. And stock market listed companies have to publish a lot of information, and is even if there are areas that a company might not publish something on, despite this being of interest to shareholders, then the very fact that they don't publish it might tell you something as well. So that's pretty much how I go about my work.
And you do get out there on the ground, don't you, as it were, and actually go and look at resources that companies have and stuff like that, because you do quite a lot of travelling, don't you?
Yeah. The travelling really is about two things. It's about generating new ideas. When you expose yourself to different countries, you get a different perspective on things. You come across companies that otherwise you might not have come across, simply because you end up picking up the local newspaper and you read about something that just is of genuine interest to you, and which maybe the locals don't recognize, because the locals have their own way of looking at things. And I call that the outside view that you take at it. So to drop into these countries and take a look around is generally a useful thing. And besides that, when you invest into real assets, property for example, property companies, it's generally quite helpful to just go to the place and have a look at everything, because it might tell you something that you couldn't take from a glossy brochure that is put out by the company. You might have a really ugly building standing next to the key so-called trophy asset of the company, and you think actually that's not quite the way it is. Well, my site, undervaluedshares.com, is really supposed to provide, first of all, an entertaining way of dipping your toes into the whole investment field. Most investment reports are just so utterly boring, I have to say. Don't want to slack off about my competitors, but I find investing is such a lively field with so much happening, and it's tied to current events, and there are so many ways to make it interesting and to enable people who are not from the investment profession to also have a look at it and not get bored after 5 minutes. I mean, that's the main problem with finances for most people. And I really want to provide access to the field. Secondly, I want to provide good ideas that people can use to make some money off. And I've just started to organize events for readers as well, where you can network and speak to other like-minded individuals. I've noticed that a lot of these people who come to my very small events then stay in touch with each other. That's pretty much what my site is about. I love hearing from readers. Anyone who writes me an email gets an answer back. And as I said, it's also a tool for myself, and any feedback that I get is ultimately worked into future reports, so that helps me as well. It's a two-way system, and well, I can only invite everyone to have a look at it. There are lots of reports on there by now. Some of them take a bit longer to read, but I think generally they provide very varied and entertaining and tangible kind of advice, which is what I try to provide.
And on top of that, because a lot of them are available in German as well, aren't they?
Yeah, all of them actually. My site exists in both English and German. The reports come out in both languages at the same time, which is something that I, in retrospective, shouldn't have taken on, because it doubles my amount of work. But I have a very loyal readership in Germany, and I kind of have to serve them as well. And yeah, they come out simultaneously in English and German.